what we're going to do for the session is pretty standard. At the beginning, I'll just introduce all of you very quickly, and then and I'll tell the audience to type questions into the chat during the videos as they go along, so that we hopefully have a nice list of questions ready to go. And then after the videos are done, I'll take them through basically in the order of the questions that were asked, which will be the same as the order of the speakers of the videos. And then, yeah, we'll give each of you time to answer, and we'll see how many minutes per person we have. But yeah, and I'll try to ask the participants to actually unmute and verbally say their questions. We'll see if that works. This platform is not great, so I might have to read their text of their chats, but yeah. And then I also encourage you to think of questions for each other as well, because I think that just makes the session more interesting. And obviously you can type those questions in the chat while the other people's videos are playing as well. But yeah, I think that'll be the nicest way to do it, because then we can just sort of manage our time well, because I can see how many questions there are. Do any of you have any questions before we get going?
I just want to note one thing. Paper number 3 won reviewer's favorite award, so just please note that when you're introducing everybody.
Sorry, what was that?
Paper number 3, Zhang won a reviewer's favorite award, so please just note that during your introductions.
Okay, I will do that. And yeah, congratulations, yeah. And sorry, what's the official name of the award?
It's called the reviewer's favorite. You can see a little badge next to the title on the right.
Okay.
We're still waiting for Clemens Pizzinini from paper 5.
Oh, and I suppose I could check that I can pronounce all your names properly. Is it right to say David Sarancic?
Yeah, that sounds quite right.
Okay, cool. And Christoph Rennpferdt?
Yeah, sounds right.
All right. And Debbie Janson?
Perfect.
Cool. And Zhang Yan?
Yep.
Cool.
Perfect. Yeah.
All right. But yes, Marco, as you said, it looks like we're still waiting for Clemens. And if he doesn't show up, I guess we'll still play his video, but we just won't have questions for him.
Exactly, yes. We'll see if somebody else from the paper maybe joins as well.
Okay. Cool. All right. So then I think we're all set to go. Do any of you have any questions or concerns or things you want to say? All right, great. Cool. So then I will just mute myself for
You're muted now, Jeremy, if you're one.
Right. Sorry, I was just saying I'll mute myself and then we'll be ready to go at 12:15. But I did that in the wrong order. Yes. Okay. So now I'm muting myself. Okay, so we've got just 1 minute left here. And I see someone else who is who's trying to share their audio and video, Yongse Kim, but since he is not listed, excuse me, as an author of any of these, I'm going to wait until after all the videos are played. Is that the right way to do it, Marco?
Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Great.
Also, I see Clemens is in the session. Can you please join us on stage with audio and video?
Yeah, so Marco, I'm not seeing... okay, wait. No, if I click on people, then I can see all the other attendees in the session. Okay, so we do have a decent number of attendees. Do you have a recommendation on how long we should wait for people to show up, or should we just kick off right away?
I think we're good to go. Just one more time, Clemens, if you can please join us. Oh, there we go. Great.
Okay, and so Clemens, can we just test your audio and video here? I can see you, but can you say something?
Hello.
Okay. Great, I can hear you.
Great.
Okay, cool. So I think that is everything then. I think we can get started. So welcome everybody to the session here. So we've got 5 papers, and I'll just introduce everyone briefly. We'll play all their videos, and then we'll have time for question and answer afterwards. So we'll have a good deal of time for question and answer. And I really hope that we have a discussion here. So I'll try to let you share your audio and video so that you can speak your actual questions. But if the platform doesn't work that well, then I can just read the text of your questions. But whichever way it works, please do type in the questions that you have for each presenter as the videos are playing, because then we have a lineup of what questions to ask, and it helps to manage the time, and we can do things all in the proper order as well. Yeah, and I think that is it. And so the talks that we'll have here, you'll see you can already see all the titles on the screen, and so I'm not going to read those out again, but I'll just briefly introduce all of the speakers. So David Sarancic is a PhD candidate in engineering and product development at DTU in Copenhagen, and his research focuses on the development of product service systems. And then next is Christoph Rennpferdt. He works as a scientific assistant at Hamburg University of Technology, doing his PhD in modular product service systems. And then we have Zhang, and his paper here won one of the reviewers' favorite awards. So I'm excited about that. I hope that the slides are also exciting. And he's an industrial PhD candidate at BTH, and he's also the founder and CEO of Big Minds Innovation in China. His PhD is on distributed innovation systems for product service systems in the circular economy. And then we have Debbie Janson. She's a senior lecturer in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at University of Bath. She spent 20 years in manufacturing, and so she has hands-on experience of safety issues in the real world, which I think she'll mention. And then finally, we have Clemens Bezzini. He's a research associate at the Institute of Automotive Technology, and he focuses on Africa, mostly Ethiopia and the Ivory Coast, and on vehicle service systems. And he's part of the ACAR mobility research team. Okay, so Marco, are you ready for us to kick off the videos? Hello, Marco.
Hi, I'm David from the Technical University of Denmark. Our paper is about designing product service system pilot projects in manufacturing companies, where we propose a process for product and customer selection. This paper aims to contribute to early decision-making in PSS design when design decisions have the highest impact regarding the fulfillment of customer needs and contribution to sustainability. Since none of those are given in PSS, we have to design for that, starting from the pilot projects. There is a gap in literature in relation to this topic. Very few authors addressed product selection and customer segmentation for PSS beyond just grouping their customers based on their revenue generated or only geographical location. Therefore, a process is needed to do that with more details than currently present in the literature. So through dialogue with an industrial manufacturing company, two questions arose, with the primary purpose to avoid resource allocation in failed PSS pilot project attempts, and to learn as much as possible through the pilot project, as not all customers will be suitable for PSS, nor does one PSS type fits all. The questions are, what are the relevant criteria and the process to select suitable products and suitable customers for the PSS pilot projects in the second question. To answer the questions, we conducted a literature review, but it yielded scarce information. Therefore, we turned to empirical research through interviews with a single case company, that is 5 managers, to elicit the selection process. The process was then consolidated and verified in a workshop where it was also agreed to conduct a second round of interviews to elicit criteria for selections. Once that was done, we executed the process to select customers and products through continuous interaction and feedback with company representatives. And the final selection was verified in the workshop. The company where the research was conducted is a machinery production company for the food industry. They're at the beginning of their servitization journey, and they want to know where to start it, considering their vast product portfolio with very different products and a diverse global customer base that they cater to. So we first conducted the product selection process, and from the first round of interviews, I listed this process to select suitable products. The agreement was made to do a new round of interviews to elicit criteria and then to rate suitability of PSS types with the elicited criteria. With PSS types, we mean product use and result-oriented PSS as defined by Tucker. The 3 types have different impact on sustainability, where result-oriented has the most potential. The process then continues to derive the ideal product attributes for each PSS type to match the ideal to real product and to finally evaluate the selection. Here's the list of 20 criteria listed for product selection: sales volume, price, complexity, reliability, etc. The criteria can assume different values, for example, low or high sales volume, and those differences are deemed to influence the selection of PSS pilot project initiatives in terms of the PSS types they should be offered in. We then rated the suitability of different product attributes, that is those 20 criteria, with the 3 PSS types to derive ideal attributes for each type. The scores from the second step were then consolidated to create a description of an ideal product for each of the PSS types. For example, from the provider perspective, good product attributes for the user-oriented PSS could be that it sells a lot, it's not too complex, it is smaller for easier logistics and take back, it is more standardized and generally easier to install. A very similar process was conducted with customer selection, as you can see here. And here is a list of 13 elicited criteria that we scored using a similar mechanism. So let's take a closer look on how we scored some of those. All the criteria described in the paper are shown here, and there are proposed measuring units for every criteria. For the customer size, for example, the measuring unit is the number of employees of the customer company and customers' turnover. And if you try to exemplify suitability scoring of customer size, we could say that smaller customers might not be able to afford to buy an asset upfront, as in product-oriented PSS by definition. Therefore, the ability to extend the payment period through recurring payments is a very, very appealing value proposition for them. And that value proposition is not that relevant for larger customers, as they can afford upfront payments in most cases. Hence, the scores of low suitability of product-oriented PSS for small customers and vice versa for bigger customers. As in the product selection, we devised a list of ideal customer attributes for each of the PSS types. For example, bigger, older customers with a lot of experience and low willingness to share data might be a good fit for product-oriented offerings. A couple of discussion points before I conclude the presentation relate to the complexity of customer and product selection in PSS, and this might be due to several reasons, such as the large number of customer touch points over a longer lasting relationship, wide scope of delivery of the offering, increased logistics operations due to service operations, and more complex pricing and finance processing solutions in PSS than in pure product sales. The selection of most promising PSS pilot project options is a highly context-dependent problem, which is why individual practitioners must further tailor the process and the criteria. But the feedback received from the case company was that the process and the criteria as elicited were great to help to narrow down the focus of the PSS development in the future. And the case company decided to start with smaller customers who are more willing to share data and to explore new options, and to start with less complex products that smaller customers usually buy, as main driving force is to learn as much as possible from these pilot projects for future initiatives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, my name is Christoph Rennpferdt and I'm a PhD student at the Institute of Product Development and Mechanical Engineering Design at Hamburg University of Technology. In this short video, I want to give you an introduction into our paper with the title Designing PSS Fleets, Consideration of the Product Architecture. I'd like to start with a short overview of megatrends. For example, globalization leads to an increase in cost pressure or new ways of consumption, leads to new business models that companies can use. This is challenging for companies, and to cope with occurring challenges, especially manufacturing companies start a transition process from being only a seller of existing or manufactured products into providers of integrated solution consisting of product and service element, the so-called product service system. This product service system can be found in different types, and depending on the type, there could be the case, or there is often the case, that the manufacturer stays the owner of the product and uses the product to offer certain kind of services. In this context, the owner needs a certain amount of products to offer services, and this amount of products is called a product fleet. And a company can use the existing products, but there is a relationship between product architecture and business model. And when you adapt the product architecture to best fit the business model, you can optimize your product or your product architecture regarding complexity and variety-induced complexity to reduce the cost and increase the profit for the company. In this context, we had a look in literature. We looked up PSS design methods with focus on modularization, and found methods that use matrices for modularization or algorithm-based modularization methods, and read something about changing life cycle and so on, and even found some literature on PSS design. But what is missing is an approach or method that considers the product architecture perspective while designing modular PSS fleets and the potentials that are connected with it. This relation between product architecture and the PSS type or business model is shown in this visualization. As you can see, when you have a really product-oriented PSS you offer, you need a very adaptable product that could be adapted to the customer demands. So you have small modules that are mostly variant or could be specific adapted for the customer, and only a few services. And when you have a very service-oriented business model, you can achieve the customization by the services, and thus you can more standardize the product and maybe achieve a product platform that is standard and could be adapted for this use in this PSS. And the standardized product platform offers the opportunity to reduce the complexity. So as a takeaway, product architecture can be more standardized when the offer is more service-based. To achieve this, we adapted existing methods from the literature. For example, the step of the variety-oriented design. The idea behind the variety-oriented design is to match the customer relevant properties with product and service components via different levels, and then optimize this with regard to the variety to only have this components variant that are needed to fulfill a certain differentiation for the customer. We did this in a case study of a mobile laser processing machine. So we had some differentiating properties, for example, the processing speed or welding, engraving, cladding as functionalities. And then we had this goal to reduce the internal variety and to develop a standardized product platform. So we filled the levels with the functions, working principles, and components. And for example, by over-dimensioning some components, we could reduce the variety. As you can see here, the white components are now standard, so standardized. And with this, we reduce the variety. In the next step, the modularization, we started with the module drivers by, for example, Ericsson, that could be assigned to the life phase and had a special focus on the life phase of usage, because it's very important. In the PSS context, you often have a long usage phase. We took a look and had specific module drivers that we found in literature and developed some new ones that could be helpful while designing PSS fleets. These module drivers are then used for modularization. In the network diagram, here you can see the network diagram for the life phase usage. It's adapted from a method existing in literature. And the idea is that you map module drivers, the specification and components, and based on this information can cluster the components into modules. The goal, especially for the PSS fleet design, was to increase the product flexibility and adaptability during the usage phase. So we added the module driver specification, the connection to the components, and then derived some standardized fleet platform that is the foundation of different variants needed to fulfill the customer demands or to offer the services. And then we have a lot of small modules that could be adapted to achieve best fit for the customer demands.
As you saw, we identified a research gap in the context of existing method, developed or adapted existing approaches to gather life phase specific module drivers and recommendations for module composition, and applied our ideas in a case study. So to conclude, I want to say more information and a detailed description can be found in the paper, so please have a look. And if you have any more questions, please contact me.
PSS value transformation from mass manufactured vehicles to provisions of mass customized services. A case study of designing and prototyping customized digital services for SAIC Motor in China. The gradually separating civilization trend has been identified among the industry companies acting in the global market. Manufacturing companies that were traditionally perceived as product-centered and today increasingly impacted by service-oriented theory, which claims that the company's provision is merely a proposition for the customer to realize the point of use. The traditional car companies pursued production and car sales in the industry primarily through the car manufacturing and the car sales. The product provided to the customer are still standardized, and there is little room to cater for individual needs. Question is how to prototype the PSS strategy for car manufacturers that can provide customized digital services for mass customized demand in the early design and development phase. This work between BTH and Vimal Innovation focuses on deploying the PSS perspective and design of customized digital services for SAIC motor. Testing of the new PSS concept impact was conducted from the conceptual design and experimental prototyping to explore how the new concept could transform the company's PSS strategy and also enable different stakeholders in the car company. Data from the prototyping process was collected by the user feedback from questionnaire and the qualitative data from the prototyping testing with the stakeholders. The industry case of this presentation, SAIC McAloone, was founded in 2011, which is the brand owned by Chinese car manufacturing Shanghai Motor. The SAIC McAloone began exploring the customer-to-business model from 2017, shifting from the product-centered approach to a service-centered one, and from the standardized mass production to mass customized services. From the PSS perspective, to analyze the existing SAIC business model was dominated by the pure car sales. The car was sold to the dealers, and then the dealers sold to the customer, even in the early design phase. Product and the services are not designed by taking account of the customer demand and real feedback from the customer. The entire value chain was product value oriented, with far less value come from services. Through the new PSS design, an online customized digital platform called SAIC McAloone was designed to guide the customer to participate into design and product development. The core of the customized digital services is the connection between the entire value chain stakeholder and the customer. The stakeholders responsible for product definition, service model, pricing model can all communicate with customer. First of all, the concept was hand-drawn into the customized service. In the design process, the connection of the services flow between the customer and the car company was expressed in the form of the characteristic, customer journey, service process, and the digital experience. After that, the customized services was designed in advance to become a digital services. And the entire service process can be experienced through the visual display and interaction. The entire prototype was built in the full scale for testing in the real user environment. The prototype construction process brought together different equipment, space solution suppliers, and the system developer in the implementation. The proposed configuration information will be transmitted to the data center of the car company to optimize the design plan. At the same time, car company will be also based on customer need to introduce the best configuration options, the total cost of the options, and the production time. The main contribution of this work was about integrating the PSS strategy into customized digital service design through designing the digital service platform, SAIC McAloone. More customer needs can be directly connected to the process of the designing and the development in the car companies, so that customers can participate in the early design phase of PSS. Car companies can also provide the customized digital services based on collecting massive customer needs. Moreover, the data platform can share demand data with the car supply chain, forming a new model of the car value chain driven by customer demands. PSS design plays an important role in the service transformation of car companies. The experimental prototypes were used to allow different stakeholders to better understand the services in the PSS design. The scalability of PSS solution can provide better customer services and create more value by transforming production capacity into service capacity. As part of the PSS solution, the customized digital services described in this case has not been introduced to one car brand, SAIC Motor, in China, and have not been widely accepted in entire car industry. Future research should also take in account the impact of the PSS solution in other industrial sectors and in other countries around the world.
Hello, my name is Debbie Janson and I'm a senior lecturer from the University of Bath in the UK. Today I'm going to speak about a product service system for safety footwear. And as you'll see in the image on screen, this is me in my welding cell, and this is where you can find me in my spare time, still wearing my safety footwear from when I was in industry. So I'm going to start today with the outcome of this work, which was the initial impact model. This is based on Blessing and Chakrabarty's design research methodology from 2009. And having completed the research clarification and the descriptive study, and following the initial reference model, I moved on to create the impact model. And the impact model for safety footwear is all about user-defined design, giving the user the choice, doing some virtual testing, removing the need for physical testing, manufacturing to order, and looking at the sustainability element of safety footwear. So ensuring that we can strip and recycle parts of safety footwear and basically we give the user a piece of footwear that fits, that is comfortable, that is industry specific, and that is sustainable. But what's the problem? Why do we need to make any changes? Why do we need to have this initial impact model? Well, currently, comfort and fit are real problems in safety footwear. In a 2019 survey by myself, Janson et al., we discovered that 63% of women and 46% of men actually can identify areas of discomfort within their safety footwear when compared with regular footwear. Also, there's a lack of functionality dictated in current safety footwear. If you take a look at these images, these are all just off-the-shelf items of safety footwear, non-industry specific, though for some industries there are industry-specific footwear such as firefighting. But generally, users will just go and purchase the nearest fit for themselves, and also something that is not industry-specific. The problem with selecting the nearest fit, especially when it comes to women, is that the majority of safety footwear is actually made in man's sizes and to fit a man's foot. And this is really common in the footwear industry. So when we see footwear, as shown here, that's labelled as women's or unisex, unisex specifically, there is no such thing. It is generally a man's shoe, and women's will often be made, we call it pink it and shrink it. So they might add something that will attract women, or some women, but it will still be a man's shoe size. Environmentally, there are a lot of considerations with safety footwear. They are used up very quickly because there are a lot of employers like to change safety footwear every 6 months or 6 to 12 months. So sometimes they remain fit for purpose, but they will be thrown away anyway. And obviously there are societal impacts. If we're expecting women to go into industry, a male-dominated industry, and put on PPE, for example, including safety footwear that is of man's fit, we're not being the most inclusive environment we can be. And just by way of example of the amount of safety footwear that's out there, just a simple search in Amazon that says safety footwear will give you over 30,000 results. So by putting this choice in the user's hands, we're not really giving them a good choice, or we're giving them too much choice in many ways. So the initial reference model that was constructed was based around the design and manufacture push model, where we identify a safety footwear requirement, a product is designed, A prototype is manufactured, and then one of the big aspects of manufacturing safety footwear is dealing with testing and certification. So two of the main tests that we have to deal with on safety footwear are the crush and the impact test. These are both currently carried out on the toe caps or as part of the main shoe, and the toe cap can look like anything like this. This is a composite toe cap, and the more traditional style is a steel toe cap. Now these have been around since the Second World War, so the design of safety footwear hasn't really moved on in 80 years really. So we need to really consider moving on with the technological advancements. After testing and certification, we see full-scale manufacture, and these are then stored and bulk shipped to retail. So there's not really much of a customer drive for this process. So what stops us making a change towards the initial impact model, where we see footwear that is user-defined and virtually tested? Obviously, cost is a big issue. We're going to have to look at a lot of capital expenditure, and the purchase price might well go up. However, I envisage that maybe the purchase price might double, but the time and use would more than double. So actually, there is some cost efficiency to be had. User perceptions. From the work we've done previously, it's almost expected that safety footwear is uncomfortable and is not fit for purpose. And this is an ongoing perception that we need users to start challenging. We do have some barriers when it comes to physical testing versus using simulation. All of the current British, European and American standards require physical testing. So there is a serious piece of work to do if we want to go down the simulation route. And materials. There are better materials or more appropriate materials out there that can be used in safety footwear. And we just need to do that piece of work again to start to incorporate new materials and new technologies into the design that hasn't changed for 80 years. But who drives that change? There's no real driver at the moment to make any change. The policymakers are happy at the status quo. End users have their feet protected, even though sometimes their feet are injured by the very safety footwear that's trying to protect them. And for manufacturers to move first on this requires, as I've said previously, a lot of expenditure to happen. So we need to educate the industry and help push these changes forward. As I say, we need to work across all of these stakeholders and develop a simulation capability, design with sustainability in mind, and educate the stakeholders. If we do this, we can move from the initial impact model that I presented right at the start towards the full impact model. And all in all, keeping safety and inclusivity as the ultimate goals. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to discuss those now. And there are my contact details should you wish to get in touch. Thank you.
Hey guys, welcome and thanks for joining my presentation on a new engineering framework for vehicle-based services. Vehicle-based services are services that require a vehicle for the delivery of a customer value. On those pictures, you see different vehicle concepts capable to render important services to rural communities in the global south. The vehicle act as platforms for special components like water pumps, ultrasound devices, or exterior light systems that are part of the vehicle package design. To develop such service-oriented vehicles, requirements across the whole service supply chain need to be considered. What data is important for the fleet operator, what functionality is required during the delivery process, and which stakeholders are involved. To answer those questions, I propose a holistic supply chain perspective for the requirements engineering during an early vehicle concept development phase. Products and service development literature proposes several methodologies to translate customer needs into design requirements, but most of the methods focus on a specific user and lack a broader perspective that is needed to cater for complex interrelations between supply chain stakeholders. Further, most literature assumes complete access to contextual and user-specific information, which is not the case for my field of application in the global south. Especially in vehicle concept design, there is no method available that allows for the identification and selection of non-driving related and service-oriented vehicle components. To arrive at such a methodology, I applied situational method engineering by Van der Weert and Brinkkemper. They proposed to construct optimized methods for every systems analysis and design situation by reusing parts, the so-called method fragments of existing established methods. Following the procedure, I defined requirements and necessary features derived from my current research project and its African context. Followed by an extensive literature review, I identified and selected suitable candidate methods fragments to construct the presented development framework. To test and validate the methodology, I have taken several field trips to our project site in Yamoussoukro, Côte d'Ivoire. There, I have been investigating the cacao supply chain spanning from smallholder farmers until international exporters. Based on the findings, I developed several vehicle-based services and the corresponding set of components. Now I want to walk you through my 4-step framework. The first block, landscaping, lays out the actual supply chain, including all stakeholders and their activities. Second, a stakeholder needs analysis is conducted and prioritized outcome statements for each stakeholders are defined. During translation, these outcome statements are taken further to actually define vehicle-based services and necessary vehicle components. Lastly, all vehicle-based services are assessed based on potential synergies and conflicts. Right, you can see the cacao supply chain map based on conventions offered by the value link approach by GIZ. During the initial step in landscaping, a literature review is conducted to identify a first set of stakeholders in the context under investigation. Accessible stakeholders are invited for an in-depth interview. According to the snowballing sample technique, one stakeholder refers to the next relevant stakeholders until a defined stop criteria. Based on the information collected, the supply chain map is drafted. With a sound understanding of the supply chain and its stakeholders, we now analyze the stakeholder needs. Following the jobs to be done approach, comprehensive outcome statements are defined. To serve his need for more labor, a cacao farmer aims to increase the number of available workers. In our case study, this has been explored by interviewing local farmers. If a stakeholder is accessible, a persona is not accessible, a persona can be created and respective outcome statements developed based on secondary data. Each outcome statement is weighted for importance on a scale from 0 to 10, either by asking directly or based on a pairwise comparison. We now actually arrive at a component level. For each stakeholder, a hierarchy tree is created spanning from job level to component level. For each job level, a general definition of a vehicle-based service that enhances the respective job is developed. An agricultural input delivery service would support farmer during his job step. We can map out all addressed outcome statements like increased number of available workers. To serve this outcome statement, our test vehicle needs to be able to transport people on the loading bay. This requires a bench or a seat. At the end, this list of identified components is consolidated and duplicate components are erased. The power of this framework lies in its applicability across various stakeholders and its focus on vehicle design. With limitations in building space, available energy for power appliance, and a maximum weight, all identified components are now prioritized based on the desirability and synergy score. The first is calculated based on the amount of outcome statements a certain vehicle-based service addresses. The latter, based on the amount of vehicle-based services a certain component addresses. With these indicators, a ranking of all developed vehicle-based services can be achieved. In my case study, a simple cacao transport service that allows the farmer to directly sell at national markets instead of intermediates, so-called pisteurs, ranks highest on desirability. The proposed framework closes the initial introduced gap in literature by including all relevant stakeholders and their requirements for a service vehicle during an early concept phase. The method provides a detailed process flexible enough to deal with partially lacking primary data and especially focus on vehicle concept design. So far, my framework is internally validated with method fragments from literature and the introduced case study. Whether the produced results are valid will be determined by the end of our research project in 2023. An actual prototype of the vehicle will be implemented in Côte d'Ivoire together with the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation.
Okay, thank you all. And that was all of the presentations. So yeah, if all of the speakers could turn your videos back on at least so we can see you again, and we can get into the questions. So, and also, if you're an attendee and you want to ask questions, click the button asking to, I forget what it says exactly, but ask to join audio and video in the upper right-hand corner. And actually, the first question asker that I will include here is Yongse Kim. Yongse, do you want to ask the questions that you had for our first presenter, David Sarancic? Or maybe you are having trouble. I'm not seeing you come up on the screen. So I will ask the questions that he had typed into the chat. So his first question for David was, what do you mean by pilot projects? And then he had two other follow-up questions. Would those three types be, and I think he means, would these three types of product service systems be enough? And how has the selection method been used, and how is it useful?
Okay, thank you, Kim. I can see the questions in the chat. So for the first one, by a pilot project, we mean a small-scale preliminary PSS offering that is only delivered to a few initial customers. And the purpose of doing it in that way is to learn as much as possible and not to invest too much upfront with so much uncertainty for the provider in many other customers and products from the product portfolio at the same time, because that could be very costly and time-consuming with questionable returns. I hope that answers the first one. The second one was whether the three types are meaningful enough. Yeah, I agree. It's a quite high level of categorization, but the case company considered that it was, let's say, deep enough at this early conceptual level, especially because at this point they haven't fully developed the concept, because they didn't select the customer who to offer to and the product to elevate to that level of PSS offerings. So I think it would be a lot more clarity if we had more details than just the three categories. But I also think that the usability of the method would drop significantly. But I also assume that the criteria that we found would be quite similar within PSS type. For example, within the US user-oriented PSS type, where we have, for example, renting and leasing. I think we would have quite similar criteria, but of course there might be differences in criteria in between those two. So that was the second one. And the third one, yes. So the method has been used in the case company to initiate discussions and requirement elicitations with the customers that we found through that process, and about the products that we selected as the most promising ones for different categories. So the company contacted and interviewed those customers about those products that we have focused on in this paper. But I think the company is still in the process of developing those offerings fully. So only after those have been delivered to the customer can we fully say how useful it was actually. But for the purpose of scoping down, they found it useful, at least in the case company. Yes.
Cool.
Okay, so if I make some follow-up comment,
and I don't know. I mean, the three types of product-oriented, user-oriented, result-oriented has been around throughout the history of a PSS work. But I think this is the time to try to find a more refined classification schemes, as the characteristics of a PSS are very diverse. Okay, so I try to do that as a way to just guide my representation of a PSS, as published in Design Science a couple of years ago. But I think on literature, like in the second paper, again, these three types are used. I think we have to be a little bit more kind of refined in talking about the characteristics, especially the companies, whether which product they want to go for PSS related, a new business model. They need to be kind of characterize the characteristics of a PSS in more detail. I think that's where we might need to pursue.
Anything you want to say about that, David?
No, I fully agree. I think there should be more detail to the types. I know this one has been here for a long time, and companies quite like it because it's simple to understand and doesn't introduce that much confusion. But there are so many nuances that could be taken into account here. So I definitely agree with that. There is a need for a more granular description of the types.
Yeah, but I think you do bring up an important problem or issue that people have to balance when working with industry, is that the complexity and completeness versus simplicity and ease of use. And different companies will find that balance at different points or different levels. Yeah. Or even different teams within the same company. Yeah, are there any other questions for David while we're still here? Even if you didn't type it into the chat, anyone who wants to pop up and ask a question verbally. So I see Tim was asking to speak. Do you have a question for David here, Tim? Oh, it looks like it's taking a minute for him to connect. So maybe not. But okay. So let's move on then to and we can come back here as well. I'll take whatever time we have at the end to sort of popcorn around to all of you randomly with my own questions. But second paper here, Christoph, I see that actually David had a question for Christoph. Do you want to read that one out? Or just re-ask it in whatever other version you had?
Okay, so I can, first of all, I want to answer, I think the same David said to Jong's question. I think he asked the same question to me, what or whether the three types are enough or not. And I had an addition, so we in our research also discussed it, and we found, or we think this three categories are a great trade-off between being too detailed to cover special types of product service systems, and the other part is to be more general. And we try to use these three categories to have this common understanding of the different types. And for the second question, yeah, whether this could be expanded to the whole PSS architecture. There I have to say, maybe it wasn't clear in this presentation. My whole PhD thesis is a more holistic approach that starts with the designing and developing of the PSS concept. And this is a small part of it. When you have the PSS concept and then you start designing the product architecture for the develop PSS concepts, then you can have this detailed look into the product architecture. And you also have to look at the service architecture. And I think in my next paper or my next article, I plan to bring this both together to have this integrated approach to design the product architecture and service architecture together, while considering this complexity and variety aspect that is missing in literature from my point of view.
Nice. David, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Christoph.
Cool. And it looks like Tim had a question for Christoph as well, but he's been sort of connecting and disconnecting here. So I don't know if there's any, if there's some technical problems happening there. So I'll just read off Tim's question for you. So he says, thanks for the presentation, Christoph. And can one take a similar approach to the modularity of services as you added to the product in a PSS?
Generally speaking, yes. I think it works the same, but you have different boundary conditions. Services are slightly different than products. Services are mainly processes that needed some resources, and my plan is to cluster the product components and the resources that you need to deliver the services together to form this PSS modules. But as I mentioned before, this would be a next step and isn't included in this paper because it is limited to the 10 pages, and I wanted to describe it one aspect in more detail rather than giving this overall approach that is too general to understand.
Cool. That sounds good. Well, that's what journal articles are for, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool. And it looks like Zhang has a question for you as well. Zhang, do you want to unmute and ask the question?
Yeah, yes. Here's things. Yeah, see, you have both the product and the service architectures. So my question is, when you set up two divided structures, so this made the challenge for you to combine the product service system at the end. So as you have mentioned, you will build integrated the methodology later, is it right?
Yes. Yeah. Before I start with this specific part of my method that I presented, as I said, there is a design phase where you develop which product components and which service components you need to deliver the product service system. Then you have this separation. You need this set of product components and this set of service components. And then you know what are the interfaces between product and services, and you can, with my approach, start to modularize product components. But yeah, as I said, my goal is to integrate the services in the future to have this workload reduced and the failure potential reduced that you can have when you design it separately.
Thank you.
Cool. And looks like Yongse also had another question for you. Yongse, do you want to unmute and ask it?
Yes, I think this kind of the adaptability is very important. And my question is, I mean, for some requirement, for some functional requirement or whatever the requirement, sometimes the product element can be kind of change it. Sometimes by changing the service element, you can fulfill similar results for the users. Then how are you going to choose whether product element adaptability is better or service adaptation is better? because these characteristics would be very needed as PSS are getting smarter and smarter?
Yeah, good question. It's hard to answer in detail because I think it's depending on the product and the really special type of PSS you want to offer. But as a more general answer, I can say if you have a more product-oriented product service system, it's more likely that you adapt the product components. And when you have a more result-oriented product service system, it's more common to adapt the service elements to fulfill the customer demands. But it has to be checked in detail for each specific company and PSS type, whether it's suitable for the underlying product and service architecture or not. So I hope this answers your question.
Yes, I think you're kind of the second part that it is not straightforward. I agree on that. Okay, it is going to be very case dependent. Okay, on the other hand, what probably easier for providing some customized the value for customers, if equivalently possible, service would be an easier solution, I think. Okay, so and also coming to the architecture issue, product architecture issue, service architecture issue, I think a service would be very, very, very different from product in its nature. I think we need more study to understand what is service, okay, and how we can characterize the service. I think probably expecting similar approach would work for service as in the case of a product may not be a good assumption. So that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, I will check in the future, and I think it's not that easy to adapt the method to consider the service architecture, but I think I can do more research in this direction regarding the service development community and include it into this more product-oriented approach I took.
Cool, nice. And I think then moving on to Yan Zhang's paper, David, it looks like you have a question for him.
Yes, thanks, Jan, for a really nice presentation. I was just thinking about this online platform where you could customize your future offering. And I was wondering if a customer could only select a predefined option, or they can also state other needs that they might have in that platform.
Jannik said yes before. From very beginning, they predefine the service needs and provide the services to the customer. But as you know, the magic things here, we provide the digital services, so the customer can tell more of their needs to the R&D center and to the retail store. So the more needs are beyond our imagination. So the new services will come out from the new needs. So the data contribute the new services came out. So I think it's the magic. Okay.
Nice.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And it looks like we've also got a question from Tim, but yeah, since I don't see him, I think he's had connection troubles. So I'll just read his question.
Answer here. Okay. Yes, in how I make the service category from traditionally PSS thinking, they provide the, for example, sales maintenance and recycling services for product. But now they provide the service category for the customer, where the category method from the product to the customer. So they categorize by the scenarios. They are using scenarios. People driving car to pick up the kids from kids garden, and some is in the accident or is in the traveling, etc. So the way to categorize the services now is changing, more human-centered and more scenario-centered, quite dynamic. The more than traditional service level, the basic services and meaningful services and the branding services. That is my answer.
Okay, thanks. And actually, I had a question for you as well. The diagrams that you used to show the services, were those customer journey maps, or what method did you use there and why?
Yes, the product services on the map. So I want to show that is to make the stakeholder can fully understand what is product service system from the high vision way, to lay out the different phase of the product service system and their relationship between the stakeholder. So that's the reason I need to draw the image.
Okay, cool. And then, yeah, okay, going on to paper number 4, Debbie. Looks like, David, you've got a question for her.
Yes, thank you, Debbie, for the nice presentation. I was just thinking, because most of the services that you presented related to really design for safety and for comfort and for recyclability or similar, but I didn't quite catch if there are any services that are offered in use in the middle life of shoes, and if there are, what would those be?
Sure. Thank you, David. It's a great question. And I think it might answer Tim's question as well that followed. So when during the process of the user wearing their footwear, inevitably, as we all know with our own footwear, the fit can change over time. So there is an element there of trying to ensure continual fit, which might mean multiple returns to ensure best fit through the life of the shoe. Also, we've got considerations around whether the shoe is still fit for purpose. So if the shoe takes an impact or a crush load, the natural thing to do is to throw it away, because we don't know that it's fit for purpose, and companies just won't take that risk. So if we can do some form of analysis to show fit for purpose, then we can potentially prolong the life of the footwear as well. The other things that happen, the aim really is to design out in-service problems. So, for example, builders on building sites quite often get their laces kind of clogged up with cement. So designing fasteners that don't have those issues, but obviously if they do, they would be able to return them. And then there's a kind of iterative design process, because safety footwear is so kind of under-designed at the moment for end users. I think a lot of the issues, they just exist without anyone knowing about them. So we've got this kind of iterative view on the design cycle. Okay.
Cool. Does that answer your question, David?
It does. Thank you.
Cool. And let's hope it answers Tim's as well. And yeah, well, I had a question for you as well. So I was wondering how much the PSS really changed the shoe architecture. Like, were you just reusing the plastic toe cap, or are you really recovering much more of the shoe than before?
The ideal is that we recover all elements, apart from things like the laces, which may have frayed and become unrecoverable. We can recycle soles. We can recycle the uppers to some degree. I think at the moment, if we could do anything, it's better than what we're already doing. So as I mentioned in the presentation, there are a lot of new materials out there, but we just don't use them because a lot of the testing regimes, that they're just too difficult to get through the tests at the moment. So I think there's a huge scope, and not just for safety footwear, for footwear in general as well.
Cool. Thank you. And then moving on, just for the sake of time here. Okay, so paper number 5. So Clemens, if you are still with us, I don't see your video anymore, but are you still there? Uh-oh. Calling Clemens again. No, well, all right. Well, we can either we'll skip over those, or if Clemens reappears, we can ask him his questions later. But so, okay, so this lets us sort of cycle back on some of the other questions that I had for some of you. Well, and I want to ask a more general question to all of you who presented first. There were a bunch of tools and methods used here. I think everyone mentioned Tucker's taxonomy, and some of you even showed pictures of it. I'm curious what other methods you think are really helpful and universal, or would any of you who were speakers use the tools that you saw the other speakers present?
I can start, I think. I think this approach from Clemens, who isn't here anymore, with the supply chain perspective is really interesting for me, because in my industrial case, we have this mobile laser processing machine that needs to be shipped to different customer sites, and you need this infrastructure behind it, and also some kind of supply chain to get the materials right there at the right time. So yeah, you need some vehicle-based services for this, and I think I will have a look in this paper in more detail, and maybe contact Clemens for some exchange on our topics.
Cool.
Yes,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I quite agree. I found Clemens's paper really interesting, because he mentioned something about data not being available in Africa to find all the needs and requirements, and I think that applies not only to Africa but much wider than that. So for that reason, it's really interesting to see how he developed a process to elicit those requirements and needs in a really unstructured environment that could be applied anywhere in my research as well.
Nice. And Debbie and Jan, any thoughts on things that you might take from the other people's work?
I think for me, it's actually a similar point, that the problem I've got is the users don't realize there's a problem, which I know begs the question, is there really a problem? But I think trying to get users to, if you ask somebody, are your safety shoes comfortable? Quite often they'll say, well, no, of course they're not. So, there's this level of acceptance that I've got to get through, and trying to get them to admit these problems on the kind of customer journey is really difficult. So yeah, something that will help with that is really helpful.
Nice. And Jan, any thoughts? No? Okay. And David, I had another question for you with your paper. Even though you were simplifying down to a few product service system types here, there was still a lot of complexity in your system. Well, first of all, yeah, how do you find that balance between complexity and ease of use? And how easy is your system to use for designers? Like, how much time does it take for them to use it when they're in practice? How much time does it take for them to figure it out? And what happens if there are contradictions that between any of the recommendations?
I think it's quite challenging to answer that, especially the question, how long does it take to get used to the process? Because this one was developed together with the company, so they participated in the whole development process, and therefore they directed it as well in some sense, and they've participated from the beginning. And it should be tested how easily would someone else take it and adopt it and apply it. So that's first thing. The second thing is, yes, there are a lot of criteria that we actually elicited, and for that reason, we only used those three categories. If we say not 8 types from Tucker, but 3 categories, product user result oriented. And if we had even more, that would even introduce even more complexity, I would guess, and make it more difficult to apply in practice. And I don't know if I covered everything that you asked.
I think that was good. Well, and I like that you co-developed it with the company. I'm sure that'll really build buy-in, and even if the method itself isn't as universal as a result, I would suspect that the process of developing it with the company could be a universal thing, where like you could do that with other companies as well. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on whether it's better to have one universal method that you try to teach to everybody, or whether you have basically mass customization of the design process so that it is unique to every company?
I think there is a kind of a need in PSS design for a really comprehensive reference model that could take it all in. But for individual practitioners, I think everyone has to follow their own process that could be devised from the general reference model, so that it caters really to their capabilities and their needs. So I don't think there is a one method to rule them all by any means, but that it has to be adjusted to individual needs.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you asked
for David, actually,
okay.
My first question: what do you mean by the pilot project? I was kind of in the middle of the go out and then coming in because this mic didn't work. I couldn't hear you. So what was the context that this kind of a pilot project was done? I mean, what do you mean by pilot? That was for David.
Yes.
I couldn't hear it. Yeah.
Yes. Now I have. Okay. Now we can. So yeah, I've tried to answer the question by saying that it's a small-scale initiative to offer PSS offerings to only a few customers. And the background story behind it is that the case company wanted to start offering PSS, but they didn't want to go all in immediately, but start with smaller projects to learn as much as possible and not to invest that much money. So they wanted to select what would be a representative pilot project from which we could learn the most and get the most feedback, and related to what customer and to what product should that be, because they have a lot of products in their portfolio and they have a really wide customer base globally. So which of those pilot projects would provide us with the most learnings, essentially.
Okay, now I can kind of that explains a lot. Okay, so the company's intent is just to start small, right? I think that's good. But on the other hand, if we think about a company like Philips, okay, when they start looking at what kind of a product services system exists, and then what kind of a product that they may want to pursue for certain customers, I think a whole lot different kind of a much more detailed characteristics of a PSS would be needed. Okay, so some of the characteristics that I mentioned earlier was targeting that kind of a context. Okay, so thank you for your clarification.
Yes, thank you. If I can just add, I think the whole idea behind it was to have as quick as possible validated learning that we could get from one project to make that cycle as quickly as possible. But of course, I agree that it would be very different if it's Philips or any other bigger company that can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And so we've got just about a minute and a half left here, but I had one more question that I wanted to ask Debbie, because I think that your just your whole topic of looking at safety in this process, because you were looking at safety shoes, is a more general thing in product reuse generally. Certainly it comes up in product repair that we do some research on. And so I'm curious if you think that safety concerns of reusing products in product service systems and whatever remanufacturing or whatever processes are done to them, do you think that that is a significant concern that needs a lot more work, or do you think it's actually pretty easy to handle and that you would handle it just like any other quality factor in the product performance?
That's a great question. I think it should be a significant concern in terms of people should be wanting to do these things. I think we have some perceptions to get over, especially if we're reusing products and materials within any environment. I think some people are just they can't quite get their head around the concept sometimes, and so I think people are often the biggest barrier to these things in my experience. So whilst everything looks lovely on paper, actually implementing these things is going to be really, really difficult. And I think we're more concerned on paper than what we actually are in reality probably as a world, really. It's a global thing.
Right.
Yeah, just my opinion on that.
Great. Okay. Well, and that's time. So yeah, thank you all for giving your talks and doing a good job of handling the questions back and forth. It was nice having you all, and I hope that everyone who attended had a good time as well.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Jeremy.
All right. Cheers, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.